Virginia Tech, 32. Sandy Hook, 27. Marjory Stoneman Douglas, 17. Columbine, 13. Santa Fe, 10. Umpqua, 9. Red Lake, 9. Some of those names may not even ring a bell, even though those numbers you heard were the lives cut drastically short by instances of mass gun violence that occurred at schools. Sadly, they are not alone. Gun Violence Archives, which is updated daily, declares that there were 3,320 children, 17 and under, who were killed by someone with a gun this year alone. Just 3 weeks ago, someone brought a gun into my son's elementary school and it was accidentally discharged in the lobby. Luckily, there was only one person injured and it was nothing worse, but sadly, other parents cannot say the same. Although this topic has always been something I have felt strongly about, you never believe this kind of thing can happen to someone you love until it does. I believe that gun violence in schools can be minimized by changing outdated laws, increasing accountability for gun owners and sellers, and developing community partnerships to address gun violence. Today I will discuss the policies that I think should be enacted, why others think they will not work, and why I think these policies will work. Systemic measures should be implemented to minimize gun violence in schools. For one, U.S. lawmakers must change laws to prevent future gun violence. It is important for our country's policymakers to come together in bipartisan efforts to make laws that prioritize the safety of our children, especially when they are in school. In 1966, the Dickey Amendment was passed that limited funds for researching injury prevention, which could be used to advocate gun control. Prevention research that could be used to develop smart gun technology, such as guns that are fingerprint activated, like our smartphones. Metal detectors could also be placed at doors of all schools in our country. I believe there should also be increased accountability for gun-owning citizens as well as those who sell guns. This should include more extensive background checks, including criminal background and mental health checks, prior to future gun sales. It should also be required that gun owners obtain licenses and register their guns just as one would a car. Businesses who do not follow these requirements prior to the sale of a firearm should face hefty fines and potentially lose their license to sell firearms if repeated infractions are made. Lastly, I believe that partnerships and collaborations within the community that address gun violence on a mass scale are important. Government-funded informational programs that provide education about gun safety and related topics in communities that are free for all to attend should be implemented, especially in communities that have high rates of gun violence. I believe it should also be incredibly beneficial to allow, train, and encourage pediatricians and emergency responders to discuss gun-related topics and safety warnings with children and families within the community in age-appropriate ways. Medical professionals work firsthand with victims of gun violence, as it is an issue of public health, so they have a valuable point of view which could potentially prevent some cases of gun violence. Schools should also receive incentives from the federal or state levels of government if they provide ongoing training for all staff members in bullying prevention and understanding signs of mental illness or unrest that could lead to instances of violence. So why has the United States not enacted gun control yet, you ask? Our country is divided on whether gun deaths would be reduced through tougher laws. Those who oppose gun control measures feel strongly that controlling or limiting the purchase or possession of a firearm violates their constitutional rights. Understandably, it is worrisome to think of our government redacting our constitutional rights, which could create a slippery slope to other rights being limited, such as freedom of speech or religion. And the right to protect yourself and your family is a drive that is in most, if not all of us. Opposers of gun control also believe that it does not work. Admittedly, felons are already prohibited from legally owning guns. However, some still find ways to obtain and use them illegally. Those with the intention of harming others can still find other ways of inflicting harm, and gun control measures would not be able to inhibit that. It also should be noted that the majority of gun owners do not commit crimes. It is true that the good guys also carry guns, and that armed civilians have also been able to defeat active shooters on occasions, such as in the 2013, when an armed security guard was able to disable a shooter at Prince Middle School in Atlanta, Georgia, after only one student was wounded. Another such instance is that of 71-year-old Samuel Williams, who prevented an incident at a Florida internet cafe. Those who oppose gun limitations believe that it should not be made harder for responsible gun owners to purchase and own weapons that could potentially save lives in instances of attempted shootings. However, I believe that the measures mentioned earlier are important and that they would be effective, and I will share with you why. Firstly, it is important to revise or amend gun laws under the Second Amendment, which currently state that it is the right of the people to keep and bear arms which shall not be infringed. Ratified in 1791 with no new revisions in 227 years, this amendment is very outdated. The political and social climate of the 1700s starkly contrasts that of current times, and military-grade assault weapons, silencers, and extended magazines are unnecessary in home security use. Secondly, it is currently quite easy to acquire a gun. In most of the United States, there are no mandated waiting periods. Only 11 states and the District of Columbia require waiting periods before the purchase of a firearm, with such periods ranging from 24 hours to 2 weeks. In most of the country, buying a gun is easier than buying a car. In other countries that have strict gun laws, such as Japan, Australia, Germany, and the UK, gun violence rates have drastically diminished. Japan rarely has more than 10 shooting deaths per year, with a population of 127 million people. Japanese people who wish to own a gun must attend an all-day class, pass a written test, and complete a shooting range test with a score of at least 95%. They must pass a mental health evaluation, background check, and their family and friends will also be interviewed. Only shotguns and air rifles are allowed, as handguns are not permitted, and they must retake the class and tests every 3 years. In Australia, Prime Minister John Howard implemented a buyback program that bought and destroyed more than 600,000 automatic, semi-automatic weapons and pump-action shotguns. Over the next few years, gun death totals were cut nearly in half. Germany has been restricting the purchase and use of guns since 1972 and has updated its gun laws several times, especially after instances of school shootings. The Federal Criminal Police Office reported in 2010 that 147 homicides were caused by guns in a population of nearly 82 million. Gun laws in Germany restrict the acquisition, possession, and carrying of firearms to those that have a credible need for a weapon, with fully automatic weapons completely banned. Licensed gun owners must also have liability insurance before they can own a firearm. In 1997, the UK banned private ownership of handguns, semi-automatic, and pump-action firearms after a gruesome school shooting. It also required shotgun owners to register their weapons. The government bought back 162,000 guns and 700 tons of ammunition. As a result, there are only about 50 to 60 gun deaths per year in England and Wales, which have a population of 56 million. While there are certainly some positives to gun ownership, not every gun-owning citizen is responsible enough to safely own and operate a firearm. As there are over 40 million guns in our country, it is important to acknowledge that guns in the United States are not going away. So enacting policies that help combat the deadly violence associated with them is the least that can be done. Policies such as changing outdated laws, increasing accountability for gun owners and sellers, and implementing community educational efforts could address this issue. By creating a compromise and allowing responsible, law-abiding, mentally sound citizens to continue to purchase and own firearms if they followed legal protocol, violent shootings in schools as well as other public places could be reduced. After listening to my speech, I hope you are more aware as to why there is division in the United States regarding gun control and what could potentially be done to cut down on instances of gun violence in schools and other public places around the country.